mode.
Thank you for joining the fifth in our series of senior living webinars. Today's focus and topic is on environmental monitoring. And today I have with me Chris Prada, Regional Manager with Status Solutions, and I have Amanda Miller-Lau, our Senior Living Specialist. And between them, they have experience of working with several hundred senior living facilities across Canada, public and private, large and single facilities. While our previous webinars have primarily focused on alarm management relating to things like care delivery, emergencies, or risk management, environmental monitoring mainly falls under the umbrella of efficiencies and cost savings. So perhaps, Chris, you could help kick this off by setting the context for this discussion.
Sure. And thanks everyone for joining us today. As far as environmental monitoring is concerned, what it's really about is monitoring, alerting, and reporting on all environmental issues within the facility. Looking at eliminating human error, about meeting regulations, about protecting people and assets. And in some later slides, I'm going to draw on some examples as related to each of these. But ultimately, you have trained staff that are often undertaking mundane tasks to monitor equipment, environmentals, etc. It can be much more efficiently done by technology. So ultimately, we're looking at making sure that whatever environmental issues there are, whether it be temperatures, humidity, water, fire, smoke, virtually anything can be monitored, alerted to those people who could take action if something goes outside the specifications, and then producing the reports for regulatory issues and follow-up with management and staff.
Thanks, Chris. So Amanda, if I was playing devil's advocate here, I could probably say, can't you just do this all today? Isn't it possible to do environmental monitoring today?
Sure, there's lots of different standalone systems that are out on the market that I'm sure a lot of the homes that are on today use, and or it's done by staff. So for example, if we think of medical refrigeration, most of the homes have a medical refrigerator. The nurse at the beginning or the end of the shift will take the temperature to monitor it. So they'll usually write it on a piece of paper that's attached to the front of the fridge. And although on the top of the piece of paper it says what temperature it should be in or not, who knows if the nurse is looking at it. They're just doing their job that they've been trained to do by writing on the temperature. There is a cost to medications. So if there is if they're outside of the ideal temperature and nobody is notified, there could be a cost to medications that are lost. So it could be quite costly if it's not monitored properly.
So on that topic then, after that setup, perhaps you could walk through, Chris, what is possible then that is outside of those things that Amanda talked about, either standalone systems or using manual means to track environmental conditions.
Yeah. So if we talked about what is possible, virtually anything. I think in this discussion we're going to talk about more traditional things like temperatures and humidities and so on. But just for an aside, for example, we do monitoring of environmentals for Dannon yogurt. Well, in the manufacturing of yogurt, there's more than temperatures and humidities. There's pH levels, there's ammonia levels, there's a whole bunch of other things. And we have the ability to do that. But getting back to this topic, the typicals are temperature, humidity, fire, smoke, water. And I like to draw examples to help people understand. Amanda alluded to the medical refrigeration units. I was doing a site survey with a series of major operators of senior living facilities, and we were in one building where I took the piece of paper that was logged at the temperatures and showed the management that even though people were logging it, what was logged was outside the specification. So people had been doing their job as simply writing down the temperature, but nobody bothered to alert anyone that the refrigeration unit has been off for the entire month.
And I guess that would also assume that, you know, the somebody knows what they're doing, but you can have staff changing over, new staff coming in, and so not only do you have to do this manually, but you have to keep remembering to explain to all these individuals what they should be doing and why it's important, right?
Absolutely. Training is a big piece of it, but ultimately you have trained, skilled staff meant to take care of people doing a mundane task. It's costly, it's inefficient, and ultimately can result in loss of product. Other areas, as you alluded to, there are equipment out there to monitor, for example, fires, etc. We all know we have fire panels, we all have sprinkler systems and so on. But the reality is these systems only trigger after there's a fire. And they only go into alarm on certain rules. And often there's the ability to prevent issues with further integration. For example, we did a case study on a facility in Ontario where we were integrated to a fire panel. The panel went into alarm, but because it was a two-stage alarm, the first alarm does not roll fire trucks. It is an internal alarm only, and it is expected of the independent resident to pull the major alarm in the hallway. The reality is nobody was in the apartment. They had forgotten a pot on the stove. The pot melted. Melted metal was getting all over the place and triggered the alarm in the apartment. Because of the integration, we picked up that first stage alarm, alerted staff, went into the room, and actually prevented a fire. The fire alarm would have only gone off when it hit stage 2, which meant you already have a significant fire. And as we were talking earlier, I always tell the story about my grandfather, who we put into a major home. We put him into a senior living facility because he fell asleep in bed at my aunt's home and set the bed on fire. They couldn't afford that risk with young children. He moved into a home, and within a month, he burned down that facility. Fell asleep in bed with a cigarette, the bed caught on fire, and ultimately it couldn't be stopped. Point being is that the systems out there are what is required. It meets regulations, but often that's not enough.
And they're doing their job. It's just that the job hasn't been thought through fully to make it as effective as it could be, right?
Or it's not taking into case prevention.
Mm-hmm.
It's taking into case acting on the event. And we're talking about doing environmental monitoring for prevention, not just catching the event.
Not reaction.
In other words, not catching that the medical refrigeration unit is out of spec. It's preventing it from going out of spec.
So seeing the trend of it going out of spec and doing something about it rather than waiting until it dies and then having to reactively follow up.
Instead of responding to a flood by the floors have heaved and equipment has failed, we react before there's a flood. So the point is that we can monitor virtually anything. It's about prevention. It's about making sure that mundane tasks are taken out of human hands where there's a chance of human error.
So on that point then, let's talk about the notion of taking it beyond reactive support to proactive support, and then the only way that can happen is to remove the manual, I guess, integration of all these elements and to make it automated as much as possible and integrated. Could you perhaps, touch on that then and how that's possible?
Absolutely. So the key to our solution is that we are essentially software. It is designed to integrate with virtually all existing systems. So a facility does not need to look at ripping and replacing what they already have. We will tie into the existing fire panel, into the existing HVAC system. If they have refrigeration units that output data, we can tie into those. But also adding wireless sensors to equipment that may be older and could be maintained longer by the simple addition of a sensor. So through the integration, we will be able to take alerts off of the fire panel, off of the HVAC system, create escalation, because again, we are not just integrated to one system, we're integrated to multiple systems. So for example, I detect an issue in a server room, it's too hot or too cold, whatever, which might risk the equipment. We could trigger an HVAC system to turn on an air conditioning unit. So bring the temperature down, and when the temperature comes down, it will trigger to turn it off. But also alerting to staff. Most systems will send out an alert, but they do not necessarily have the ability to escalate. They do not necessarily have the ability to hit every communication device. So we can send alerts to staff on pagers, on walkie-talkies, on cellular phones, on smartphones, through electronic signage, through email. Regardless of what the person is carrying, the escalation can ensure that whatever the event is, it's going to be addressed by someone. So ultimately, integration is about maintaining what you already have, extending the life of older equipment, and ultimately saving time, making sure that whatever events need to be addressed are addressed in a timely manner.
And I guess another aspect of that is the fact that those alerts can be very focused on individuals. So, for example, in senior living facilities, you want your nursing staff, for example, to spend their time on caring for the individuals, not being part of the maintenance process, which is what we make them otherwise. So these alerts can be sent directly, I guess, if it's to do with facilities, it worked right to the maintenance person. Is that?
Well, absolutely. I mean, the system allows unlimited rules for every device, so you can have unique rules for every device, the right information going to the right people. And I think you bring up another interesting point. Often alarms or alerts generated from equipment does not have details. Fire alarm goes into alarm, you hear an alarm in the building, but you don't hear where the fire is.
Right, so you're running around looking for the...
Right, or running down to the fire panel to read the information to make the announcement. Through this type of integration, the system can read the exact details. So I know where the event is, what is the temperature, whatever the specific event is.
And that actually has a bit of a calming effect on everyone too when it's a more organized
you know what to do.
Support as opposed to this random panic that happens.
Right.
So then one of the things that was mentioned earlier was you used, it was a non-senior living example, was you brought up the fact that other things could be monitored. Perhaps we could just look at what things can be monitored. Amanda, let's look.
Sure. So if we start with the example of the refrigeration that I talked about earlier, we can put a monitor in any of the fridges, whether it be for medication or whether it be in your kitchen, fridges or freezers. You can have temperature monitors throughout the facility wherever you need. You can put temperature monitors in boilers, for example, if that's something that works for your home. The temperature of the water also has to be monitored, so that's another place where a temperature sensor could go. Chris talked about fire. We can integrate to fire panels, but there's also smoke detectors, or we can integrate with your current smoke detector that's in place, so you're able to see what particular room smoke detector went off, and it's not necessarily a zone that will give you. Cigarette busters. Chris talked about his grandfather who liked to smoke. So you perhaps are a non-smoking building and you have a resident who moves in who is a smoker. And this is a way that you can be alerted as soon as they light their match or use their lighter, a cigarette buster. And just so you understand, it looks like a vent or it looks like a sprinkler. It's not something that the resident in the room will realize that they are being monitored. So it still looks like their home.
And these are wireless devices, right? So they could be moved around. They don't require it to be physically wired in to operate, right?
Correct. So you can, if that resident moves rooms, you can move that with them, or you can keep it in the home, and as you see the need over time, you can use it for different people. But that cigarette buster can also be used not necessarily for people who smoke, but also if you have problems with candles. If you have a certain person in the building who likes to leave candles on all the time, it will work the same way. So there's different uses for different things as well. So there's a variety of different things that we can put on. We have a dry contact relay that can be used for different things.
So that's where, as long as the device may not be able to be monitored normally, but has a relay contact on it, and we can attach an adapter, if you want, onto it, that turns it into a wireless device, right?
Correct. So if you have a problem, often we can solve it, I guess is the answer for that.
So I guess the end result is that there's pretty much everything in your facility that is unmonitored today could be monitored.
Correct.
And obviously, then it would have access to that intelligent automation we just talked about, and the ability to both escalate as well as direct and focus those alerts when they happen. Well, maybe we can just run into a couple of examples, and I think because that's often the way to get across the points we've talked about. And I think there were 4 that you wanted to address. We talked a little bit about these, but perhaps we can make them a little more, flesh them out a little bit.
So temperature logging. So we have a number of homes who actually use the environmental license, and they monitor temperatures in their medical refrigerations as well as in their kitchens. This takes away from the nurse having to log it because it's automatically logged. The reports come automatically, and because the temperature is set at a current level, the high level and the low level, if the fridge is outside of either of one of those, it automatically sends an alert to whomever you want it to be sent out to, and it could be multiple people in multiple ways. So if you want the maintenance person to get a phone call, or you want them to get an email, or both, we can do that. The general manager can also get the same alerts. However you want it to be set up is how it is sent out.
So preventing spoilage of expensive medical, medication, but at the same time, not, as Chris's point earlier on, it's a proactive alert as opposed to reactive.
And same with refrigerations in the kitchen, for that matter. I know we put on medical refrigeration here, but food is expensive. So you're feeding a lot of people in one day if a fridge turns off for some reason. And often they may be monitored with a different system, but know that you can integrate it with this same system to get the automatic reporting.
And not just the cost of the food going up, all the hassle to then get rid of it and get new food in and so on, right? Yes. So yeah. What about the boiler monitoring? Yeah.
Boiler monitoring is the same. We put a temperature sensor in the boilers, so we make sure that the water is not too hot.
Is that like a mandatory thing in some of these places?
So yeah, so they have to also monitor the temperature every day and make sure that the temperature going into the suites is not too hot or too cold, for that matter. So it works the same. Reporting is done automatically. It's gathered the same way, and alerts can be sent off the same way.
So besides the alert being sent off, are we tracking that? I mean, if someone said later on, hey, someone was hurt, the water was too hot, can we go back and yeah, you can?
You can.
Excellent. What about the apartment temperature monitoring? Was that one of the ones that you were looking at talking to, Chris?
Yeah, this was an interesting one because I haven't seen it done too often. But recently we had a home that actually put in temperature sensors in every apartment. When I dug into this a little bit more, I learned that what they had found was that there was a significant cost savings. Because especially a lot of the residents where it's all inclusive, they would leave their windows open during the winter to get fresh air while the heat is blasting, and do the same thing in the summer. They want fresh air, but the air conditioning unit is running. By putting in a temperature sensor in every unit, they can detect the fluctuations of somebody opening up a window while the air conditioning is trying to keep the building at a certain temperature. This is a huge cost. I mean, ultimately, this particular home explained to me that the return that they saw was enormous, and put sensors in every single apartment. As opposed to monitoring the refrigeration unit, they're monitoring the residence unit. But it also addresses issues where if a resident's heat or air conditioning failed, they're going to know about it before the resident complains, and can maybe address that. I've always put the cigarette buster on here because, as I said, it happened in my family and I would hate to see it ever happen to anybody else. We are seeing more and more homes buying a few cigarette busters for every property. The reality is the current generation, and probably a good portion of the next generation, still continues to smoke. And regardless of what we do, at some point it's going to be an issue. And I see that at minimum there should be a few sensors, address those problem people, and therefore prevent a loss that puts everybody out. So again, it's a simple solution. You buy a number of these devices, and as Amanda has alluded to, we have people using all of these solutions, and the cigarette buster is one that seems to be picking up for cigarettes, people burning incense, people that like candles. It would actually also trigger if you have cooking units and the stove was left on for too long. If you get a heat source, an intense heat source, it will pick that up also.
So there may not be smoke, as in a smoke detector, but this will actually pick up.
It's not working on smoke. It does not pick up smoke.
Okay.
It's picking up infrared heat signature of a hot spot.
Okay.
So it could be a match, a spark, a flame, a burner that's glowing red hot. It really doesn't matter. As long as you have an intense heat source, the device is going to pick it up.
And I would guess that even for the private sector homes that are trying to encourage new residents to join, and if you have places that it looks like everybody's just smoking around the building, which apart from being illegal to be smoking that close to a building like that, certainly deters people who are non-smokers to come in, right? So certainly by using the smoke buster, you can start to address the issue of people doing that, right?
Yeah, but also,
I know I say that because I know at a hospital I was on the board of, that's one of the challenges they had when they put in a no smoking policy on property. Smoked outside, in the little alcoves around the building. It took them a long time to actually get them to either move away where they're supposed to, or be able to put them onto a program to, a smoking cessation program. That way they could identify them. Yeah.
What I was going to allude to, though, is that this is also a help to the family. Again, taking my example, we knew my grandfather had this problem. Being able for a home to offer a service to the family and saying, look, we can provide a solution to protect your father. And we can offer the cigarette buster to those people because, as I said, in my case, we knew he was a problem. We told the home he's a problem. But at the time, there was no solution. Today, the family can say, yes, I want to protect my dad, and I want to protect the home, and I'm going to put in.
And often the family is the one that's making the decision of
Absolutely.
where they go and even perhaps funding that, right?
Absolutely.
So, yeah. So I guess it behooves us to at least talk a little bit about the architecture, because some of that stuff, no matter how well we've tried to explain it, may not have made full sense as to how is it possible. And I guess maybe you could help walk through this diagram and sort of separate the notion of alarms from alerts and why that's important.
Absolutely. So the diagram you're looking at here is the architectural diagram of our solution called Sera. At its core, the center of the screen is the Sera server. It is effectively a server running purpose-built software to monitor any and all alarms that may happen within the facility. So in previous webinars, we talked about monitoring doors and windows and monitoring residents and staff through mobile devices. We're talking now specifically about environmentals, and that is simply through integration to existing systems. So sort of on the left-hand side of the screen, you see the other alarm systems. We're going to take alerts off of it, or putting in our wireless sensors throughout the building. How do we differentiate between an alarm and an alert? Sort of the left-hand side of the screen compared to the right-hand side of the screen. An alarm is an event. Something is going on, but there's no detail attached to it. There's no intelligence. The Sera server, the software, what it does is it takes that event, based on rules built into the server, we create an intelligent alert. In other words, the alarm is not sent to everybody, but an alert is sent to the right individual.
So it's processed in the server first, and then the determination is made what to do with it.
What to do with it and what information to pass along. So it might be where the event is, or it might be the action to take because of the event. It can all be embedded in the alert. It's an intelligent process. So then these alerts, and this is the key point, the alerts can be pushed out to every communication device. Let's go back to a fire panel. The typical approach is fire panel goes into alarm, we hear a noise in the building, we hear the fire alarm go off. We don't know where the fire is, we don't know what to do, we don't know which exits to use. Until somebody goes on the panel, reads the information and announces it. What the Sera would do is as soon as the alert comes off, we could send specific messages. So on the paging system, we can give details of whether you should evacuate or stay in place, while through the pagers and walkie-talkies and cell phones, we might be sending different instructions to management, to maintenance, to first responders. So detailed events to who needs to get it. So at its core, that's the main difference. Now, two important pieces, again in the center of the screen, just below the Sarah server, is the reporting. It's one thing to monitor, but reporting, there was a statement one time said that you cannot manage what you cannot measure. And ultimately, that's what reports do. It allows you to manage these events, manage failures, manage how your response to events occurred, showing when the event occurred, when it was responded to, when it was cleared. And then above the Sarah server, again in the center of the screen, you will see the Network Operations Center. This is a service that Status Solutions provides, which is key to our solution, and that is 24/7, 365 days monitoring of the server. Property buys the solution, they own the solution, they manage it on their own. But we ensure that your server is operational. If we saw a failure, we saw your internet go down, we see the connection to the fire panel fail, we would then alert Unity and the site that there is a problem on site before you have an emergency that is not addressed. So, big story is we are monitoring, alerting, and reporting on all events, life safety, environmentals, security, and then providing the ability to provide mass notification on any and all of these events. That is Sarah at its core.
Thank you. So that's the end of this particular webinar, which was about really being more cost effective, but as you can see, it brings in the whole breadth of emergency notification, mass notification, and the care of the individuals that are within the facilities. Next week, we'll be running a webinar that will be on access control. Part of this will be about what we can do with the server system, but also cameras and door access control systems, which are key and critical for most facilities in terms of making sure that the people under their care are well protected. So please join us for that one. And with that, I'll say thank you very much for attending. Bye.